Make sure you stick around until the end to see how you can win free gear and products. Hey, this is PJ with CLKsupplies, and I am back with Kip Bateman. Now, he probably looks familiar to all of you because he's been on before. And Kip, 6-8 months ago, we had you on and we talked about the process of you were working for a locksmithing business, you ended up purchasing it, and we talked about all the stuff that kind of went with that and keeping the name and all of that kind of stuff. So if you haven't watched that video, in the notes below, we'll have a link to it. So you want to check that out. It'll kind of give you a lot of the backstory of kind of what we'll be talking about today. So Kip, welcome back.
Thank you.
I'm really happy to have you here. I'm happy to talk about this because one of the things we talked about in that last video was that you had purchased the business, and the business's name was Hoffman's Lock and Key, and your name is Kip Bateman,
right?
Not Hoffman, right?
Yeah.
We talked about the fact that you had owned the business for what at that point, 3 years?
Yeah, I purchased it in 2013.
2013.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so about 5.
Yeah.
About 5 years you had, or 5-6 years, you had owned that business. You had kept the name, and we kind of talked about a lot of that. And by looking at your shirt and your hat, I see that it is no longer Hoffman's Lock and Key. It is now Vanguard Lock and Key. Yeah. So I'd love to know what was the process, kind of the decision making behind, after so many years of keeping it Hoffman's Lock and Key, to switch the name. And I'm also kind of curious, because I don't know, what made you go with Vanguard Lock and Key?
So, it was one of those things that over a few years I thought, I'm so busy, there's not really any reason to change it because everybody knows Hoffman's. It was a good name. I represented the company well. So I was in no hurry. But as time went, I give people my business card. Well, you're not Mr. Hoffman, and they'd say, well, you ever thought about changing the name? And slowly over time, I started thinking about, maybe someday I should. But people know me, people know the name, why change it? But as time went on, I thought, I really want to make it my own and kind of change it, maybe a little more business oriented, a little more professional, security minded name. So, it was just a process of elimination, just thinking about it. And then I started thinking about a name, and then I decided to pull the trigger on it a year ago and say, let's do something different. Change the logo, change the name.
Yep.
And it's been positive. So
that's great. So as far as like Vanguard Lock and Key goes, awesome. I love the name, by the way.
Yeah.
But what kind of was there a few that you had liked, and how did you? I'm just curious. How did you come up with Vanguard?
I came up with Vanguard. Well, first of all, I thought about things like the Locksmith, or there was a couple other names that I was afraid about trademarking.
Okay.
Like a Lockmasters of North Idaho or something really cool, and I was like, okay, let's take it down a notch.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Hey, it's fun to think and play,
sure.
right?
Yeah, and that's what it's all about, is do not be in a hurry to figure it out. Take your time thinking about what you really like, how it's going to sound, how it's going to look on a shirt, on a hat, what people are going to think of when they look at it, what it's going to look like on your van. So yeah, take your time in doing that. For me, I was actually working on my motorcycle. I'm a huge motorcycle guy. And are
you a Harley guy? Or what?
No, I'm not. I don't like Harleys because they leak and they have a lot of maintenance issues. I own a Honda VTX 1800.
Nice.
Which is all the fun of a Harley without the maintenance issues. So somebody's going to give me a hard time for that. But I was sitting there looking at my tank, and there was a knight's helmet on it that comes back kind of like into flames. And I thought, I think that looks like a Vanguard. If you look it up in the dictionary or Knights, it was called a Vanguard, which the definition of Vanguard is first line of defense. So I thought, let's look it up. So I started looking at, logos and emblems, and eventually it molded into, I want to do Vanguard. I like that, because it has meaning to my job. First
Okay.
line of defense
Yep.
is your locks on your home, securing things and everything. I thought, you know what, that's perfect. Let's go with it. Some guys would say, well, it's a V, so that you're at the bottom of the page. But I think if you have a good name and you represent well, it doesn't matter what letter it starts with.
Sure.
That's where that came from, though. That was the inspiration.
That's cool. I like that. I didn't know what the
yeah.
meaning of Vanguard actually was.
Yeah.
So I've always when I think of Vanguard, I think of the famous, company that came up with ETFs for, funds and stuff.
Yep.
But
right.
yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I like the meaning and the name. And so you went through that process, you came up with the name, and you're like, now, was there any close seconds? Was there any close?
I considered Bateman Lock and Key, going with my own name, but I'm like, I kind of really wanted to steer away from the mom and pop thing.
Okay.
I think when you use your own name, now everybody's got their own opinion.
Sure.
It kind of just keeps you small, mom and pop. Businesses out there, commercial businesses want to see a name, something a little different, more professional, more business oriented. So that's kind of what made me make the decision on that.
Yeah, it makes sense, based on that to go with, something like Vanguard or whatever. So yeah, that's awesome. So you go ahead, you come up with the name, you go through the paperwork to get it filed, and then all of a sudden, one day, your phone rings, and you're like, Vanguard Lock and Key instead of Hoffman's, or tell me about that first experience.
I will say that it is really difficult when you've been saying another name for years. It is extremely difficult to get that out of your head. It's just a lockup, and I would say Hoffman's Lock and Key. Sorry about that. Vanguard. I would do it several times. There's been once or twice, still a few months ago, I've done it,
Yeah.
Or I'll get Vanguard. I thought this was Hoffman's. I'll get that kind of stuff, and then you got to explain. Nope, still same guy, same number.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that'd be kind of a fun but weird, awkward. Saying that. So. Let's dive into that a little bit. So all of a sudden you start answering the phone that way, and of course they're going to be like, Kip, it sounds like your voice, but what are you saying a different name for?
Right.
How would you kind of explain that to the customers?
I usually say, I've been thinking about changing the name for years, and one thing I did do with my customers, like the repeat loyal customers, I would say, I've been thinking about changing the name. I'll bring it up in a conversation because I see them all the time, to kind of get them used to it. And then when they call, it's like, oh, so you finally decided to pull the trigger. That was a big thing. So that was the easiest way to transition into that. And, if they needed more detail, obviously I'd go into it, but I don't want to bore my customers with details of my business. Unless they ask, then I'm happy to oblige. But
sure.
So, yeah.
Okay. So through that, now, was there any customers or people who answered the phone that they were kind of weirded out about it, or was it a pretty smooth transition?
It was a smooth transition except for online. Well, I called this number and it says Hoffman's, and it didn't say Vanguard yet. There was a couple of little weird websites because you leave a trail online.
It's hard to clean up every little thing.
It takes forever to adjust that. So I'd get a couple of those calls, and I'm like, well, we're working on fixing that, but it is Vanguard now,
Yeah.
So when you just got to inform them, they're like, oh, okay, great.
Okay.
Didn't need much explanation after that.
Okay. So after this amount of time that has went by, do you at all regret the decision?
No. No, I do not.
You don't? So Hoffman's, what year did Hoffman's start? Do you remember that?
I believe it was 2002? 2 or 3.
Okay, 2002 or 3. So, it's a couple decades almost as Hoffman's Lock and Key, but you've been kind of the face of it since, what year? About 2010?
Let's see, about 2009, yeah.
No, okay.
Yeah.
2009, so you were a part of it for the past decade.
Yeah.
So everyone was already kind of familiar with you. And we kind of talked about in the last video that transition. It's a lot easier when you've been the one doing the work.
Right. Nobody even really knew the difference except for people that were used to working with the previous owner and knew him as the owner.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you did that. So you are happy with the name change. It sounds like all in all it went pretty smooth, especially by warning, kind of giving people a heads up, dropping, little hints that, hey, probably going to be changing the name. So it went pretty good for you.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. I mean, you can send out an email to people, your regular customers, if you like doing that sort of thing. It just depends on how you work. If you're a people person and like to tell them personally, or you want to send out electronically, there's lots of ways to do it.
Absolutely. So, Kip, for everyone who is listening and thinking about, there's a lot of businesses. It seems like the locksmithing industry is in this kind of this stage of transition right now. I hear so much about people taking over existing companies and all the stuff that kind of goes with that. And so I'm curious to hear your perspective on if someone is thinking about doing what you're doing as far as switching the name of a business that's been around for a couple decades.
Yeah.
Is there any advice you would really give them, or something that wish maybe you knew before you changed the name?
I would say take your time. Don't be in a rush, because it can cause a lot of problems, obviously, with customers, paperwork, everything. If I had to do it over again, I probably would have maybe made sure that all my online stuff was more ready to launch with the new name and a little more polished and cleaned up. Before I did that, I kind of would have went through and double checked, is it still showing Hoffman's or an old address or something? Maybe gotten in contact with a company that could help me do that, because it took me longer, because I'm not an online tech guy.
Sure.
So I had to figure out a lot of that on my own. But that would be one of the big ones.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a complicated, even when we moved to this new location, to get our Google verify on the address was different. And so we had will call customers still showing up at the old one,
Right.
and it's like, hey, we're just waiting for that postcard, sorry,
Right.
So I totally get the fact that all the Yelp and the Yellow Book listings and Google and all that stuff, right? It takes a bit. So that's some good good advice.
That's a big one. Making sure your stuff's up to date, your paperwork, your LLC stuff, your insurance is transferred, don't do it after the fact. Get on it before you even change the name. That way you're ahead of the game.
Absolutely, Kip. Well, hey, I'm really happy to hear it went a pretty smooth transition going from the legacy name to the new Vanguard name. I think it's a great name, and
Thank you.
I'm really happy you're doing well. So thank you for coming back on and talking about this. Definitely everyone watching, in the comments below, let us know what type of questions you have for Kip about this transition. We'd love to hear and answer them. Kip, once again, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. Everyone, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. I'm guessing if you just watched this video that you work with locks and keys. And to us here at CLK Supplies, that makes you a lock boss. And we want to hook you up. Here's how it works. Throughout the week, we post videos on YouTube, like the one you just watched. And all you need to do is comment on the videos and include the hashtag LockBoss. When you do this, you're automatically entered in to win one of 5 free prizes that we give out each and every week. No purchase necessary. So if you're a lock boss, join us each week to learn, grow, and win.